Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Nighttime Show with your host, Stephen Kramer Glickman. Tonight, you have me, the voice of the Nighttime Show, Mike Black, our head writer, Matt Walker, and our very special guest, known for the Muppet Christmas, Farscape, and Muppet Treasure Island, Brian Henson. And now, the man who would look so much better if they'd used practical effects, Stephen Kramer Glickman.
I'm an animated character. It's just embarrassing to look like me and actually be a real person. How you doing?
You can see the lines on the blue screen.
You can see all the lines. Why is it happening?
He's not even sharing the same light as the other people.
It's hard to believe sometimes that I'm a real person that has like things that actually happen.
It's hard to believe when I hear voicemails from you that you're a real person. I'm like, this is something that would happen to Tom or Jerry. This is not what humans go through.
We had a situation recently where Matt decided to take me for a steak dinner. He said, "Hey, we had a big, great show. We had the live nighttime show, and it like sold out to capacity, and it was such a big night.
So you deserved a night at Sizzler.
A night on the town. And so we went to what's the name of the restaurant?
The Pacific Dining Car.
Yeah, so we went to Pacific Dining Car, and I got a little overzealous in my ordering. And
now, how much was a steak at the dining car?
Normally, it's
normally it's expensive, but they have a deal because they opened in 1921 and it's their 95th anniversary, so they have a 1921 steak dinner, so it's like $19.21.
Okay, so like a $60 steak for $20.
Yeah, it was like a 10-ounce steak for like that is normally like $60. So I decided to order 2 10-ounce steaks because I'm a high roller and I like gambling with my life. And I thought I'd have one steak dinner there and then bring the other one home. I was like, that's a smart move. I ended up eating
playing it heart smart.
Playing heart smart, of course. Yes, I ended up eating both 10-ounce steaks, so 20 ounces of steak in the restaurant, and I was so sick I was sick painfully, because basically the steak turned into like a sword made of steak, and it just cut through my body for like days, and I was in all this pain. And long story short, I asked Matt if I told him about what happened, and he was like, he laughed at me and thought it was embarrassing. And then I said, can we go to on the way home, I was like, can we stop by Rite Aid so I can pick up a little something to like help my stomach because I'm not feeling very well. Long story short, we asked some guy, hey, can you help us?
This guy's like
find
21 who works at the store.
Yeah,
where the
where whatever the stuff was for my stomach, right? We find this stuff, and he's like, I don't understand. What do you need? And I'm like, my stomach is in all this pain. Can you please help me find something so I can please? I have so much pain in my stomach, and he finally helps me find the product to buy.
Well, he's like sort of laughing at him.
Because they're kind of laughing at me because of what I was trying to buy. But by the time when I finally found it and bought it, he the kid turned to me in front of Matt, and if this hadn't happened in front of Matt, no one would believe him. What did he say?
He's like, no, I wouldn't normally ask this, but aren't you Gustavo from Big Time Rush?
I'm like, really, man?
No, Steven. So Steven says no, that's not me. And I'm standing over there, and I'm like, yep, that's him.
That's him.
Right there. That's him.
That's the guy who's about to have a knife made of steak sliced through his body. That's the guy.
And less than 24 hours go by, and I invite you to Korean barbecue.
Yes.
And you're like...
And I was like, maybe I should.
You're like,
I almost considered
well, what
it.
is it exactly? And then I explained, it's raw meat that you cook yourself. And he was like, oh, no.
No, that's not happening. We need to introduce our guest because we are sitting in his screening room, and it is an absolute honor and pleasure. The producer of such wonderful hits as Dinosaurs, The Secret Life of Toys, Gulliver's Travels, Muppet Treasure Island, Muppets Tonight, Muppets in Space, of course Farscape, and then I I grew up knowing you from Labyrinth and from one of my favorite movies of all time, which I've seen a million times, Return to Oz.
Yeah.
It is an absolute honor to be able to hang out with you and to know you in real life as well. Brian Henson's here.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for coming to me. And we're sitting in
of course.
here. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful screening room.
Can you explain where we are? Because that's kind of a cool
we're
thing
in
too.
right now. We're in the Charlie Chaplin Screening Room. We're in the Charlie Chaplin lot that he built in 1917. I want to say, and it's now the Jim Henson Company studio, and we are sitting in Charlie's screening room, where he would screen dailies and rushes and stuff like that. And it's pretty cool because when we got the lot in '99, we got it from A&M. They'd had it all the way back into the early '70s, and the screening room was never used because they're a recording business.
Sure.
So when we bought the lot, this room was almost cobwebby. I mean, it was really hardly used, and so we fixed it all up.
It looks beautiful now. And if you ever are in Los Angeles and drive by the Henson studio, you'll see Kermit the Frog up on the roof, and he's dressed like the Tramp. It's a very cool nod to the past, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
I really like it.
It really is. It's super cool. And you can there's even like a little fake door where you see him kind of leaning out the door.
Oh,
front
yeah.
as well, too. I love it. Where were you guys at before you came here?
Well, funny story. My dad came out in '89-ish, and he was selling the company to Disney at the time. And then he passed away. But he had already moved a lot of executives out and stuff like that.
Had that deal already happened before he passed?
No, it was happening.
Oh, wow.
Because it never finished. So then he had already relocated the headquarters out here, but he was in Disney property. And then we didn't do the merger in the end. We didn't sell the company to Disney for lots of reasons. There were weird tax stuff that had to do with my dad dying and stuff like that. So in the end, we didn't actually sell the company. And then we actually sued them because they weren't going to close the Muppet. They weren't going to pay us for the Muppet attractions in Disney World, and it was a little bit of a nasty situation, and which ultimately Michael and Eisner and I got along really well. Ultimately, everything was great, and we made Dinosaurs together and everything. But just before that, there was an ugly sort of little lawsuit that happened. And
that happens with friends.
Yeah, and
it's every now and
so we filed suit in New York, which was like 6 o'clock in the morning here, and I was going to CNN. We were going to talk about it, and I get a call from our lawyer saying, "Are you really in Disney property?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And they said, "You got to move." So,
oh my God,
we're suing you. You have to move now, like right now. So everyone in the company came and gathered everything up, and we moved to Raleigh Studios. And when we were at Raleigh Studios, we thought, we'll be here like a couple months while we find, the right location for us. And we were there for it took 8.5 years to find something that we really liked. And so when this lot came on the market, Universal bought out Polygram. Polygram owned A&M, but Polygram was quite financially distressed at the time. So Universal bought this lot and just let go all of the A&M employees. So it was kind of weird. We walked in, it was like everything was still there, but there were no people. It was like a weird Stephen King story.
And
then we got it very quickly.
You guys still do music recording here and stuff, don't you?
Yeah, which was terrific because obviously there's a lot of music in our world and in our company with the Muppets and all of that stuff, but we've never been a recording business.
Right.
So when we got the lot, I talked to the guys that were over there and said, well, I don't know anything about the recording business, but the studio is absolutely gorgeous. It's the studio that Herb Alpert designed and built himself, and it's still kept exactly as he built it. So it was such a cool thing. So I said, well, if you can run it, then I'll definitely keep it open. So and it's been running ever since, and it's now, I think, it's considered one of the top 2 rock and roll recording studios in the world.
Like, I would say about half
really
the time we've come here, we've seen some sort of legend of music.
Yes.
Just wandering out. Like, I got made fun of by Coldplay.
That really,
like
that's a real thing that happened.
I thought you said legend of music.
Okay, now settle down. They're nice people.
No,
it was actually like reverse made fun of.
No, it was great.
They saw Steven has a suitcase that looks like Han Solo in Carbonite.
Yeah,
and
it's like a
so
briefcase.
The lead singer of Coldplay, what's his name?
Chris Martin.
Chris Martin. He goes, "Do you dress up like Jabba the Hutt?"
Oh yeah, he goes. That's a nice case you got there. And we were like, "Oh, thanks." And then John goes, "Yeah, we're big Star Wars fans." And then he looks at John, right?
Yeah.
John Schnepp, and goes, "Do you dress up as Jabba the Hutt?" And John was like,
"You're a jerk.
You're a
like,
jerk." He didn't say that. But he was like,
he was
"Thanks
just
a lot."
He was just like dumbfounded, and so I took the bullet and I go, "I don't have to dress up like Jabba the Hutt." And then Chris Martin felt really bad, and he goes, "Come on, mate. I was just joking." And I was like, "Oh, no."
But it's like you run it like while we were sitting and when we were just hanging out and getting everything set up, Randy Jackson walked in and came and said hi to everybody, and it's like that recording studio is like legendary.
Yes.
Like it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
But this whole lot is legendary. When you guys moved here, if you can tell us the story a little bit about the Chaplin footprints. Do you know that story about?
Yes.
Yeah, that is your. Yeah.
Which part? Well, when Charlie
yes.
built the lot, he did the tramp footsteps on the concrete step that's just before you go into the recording studio. At that point, there wasn't a recording studio; it was just part of the studio. What is a recording studio now was a shooting stage that Charlie built, and then it was converted into a recording studio. But yeah, he's got the tramp footprints, and then it finishes at the end, and he signed it and dated it in the concrete. But the last square, where his last footprints, and he added his handprints as well and signed it, was taken when Red Skelton owned the studio. At one point, Red Skelton owned the studio, not for very long. I can't remember, just a few years. But while he owned it, he took out the last... slab, the concrete slab, and he donated it to Vincennes University. Is that right? I think so. So we did somebody said to us, "I know where that last piece is." I was like, "You know where it's at Vincennes University?" Yeah. So we sent our Creature Shop guys to Vincennes and took a mold, because obviously normally we're molding like sculpts of creatures and stuff like that, but we did a mold of that concrete slab, and then we brought the mold back here and we poured another one, so we have a perfect match. But the original's still there.
That's so cool. I love that. When did you guys get the Creature Shop? When did that open? Out in
the Creature Shop opened in London originally,
right?
And it was during Labyrinth. What happened was my father made Dark Crystal, and he found artists from all over the world. He really worked on Dark Crystal for years before shooting it. So he was slowly building up more and more people that were working on Dark Crystal. And because that was the first one, it was considerably more difficult than making Labyrinth, because it was creating all these new techniques for making puppets. And he put together that great group and made Dark Crystal. And then afterwards, he kind of, let them all go, and George Lucas hired him up to do Return of the Jedi and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
that
then my
makes
dad
sense.
brought them all back again for Labyrinth. And at that point, it was during Labyrinth that he said, I can never produce enough to keep a full-size Creature Shop going all the time. So I'm going to open it up so that the Creature Shop can service other producers. And so he did that during Labyrinth. And the very first movie that we did that was not a Henson movie was Dream Child. So that really technically was the first Creature Shop job, was Dream Child.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And is the Creature Shop still out there? Is there still a Creature Shop
in London?
There?
No, we shut it in 2005. The British industry is a very tricky industry. It goes from being really flush and everybody's working to these quiet spells that can last for years. And it's tricky, and it all relates to exchange rates and tax incentives and all this stuff. But the exchange rate is a major thing because the British pound to the American dollar fluctuates like there's no tomorrow. So one day Britain's right now it's about normal. So Britain's about normal right now.
Right.
But it can sometimes be really expensive, and then other times it gets anyhow. So in 2000, I think it was 2005 that we finally we felt we had to shut the UK Creature Shop, which is a shame because that was the original Creature Shop. But we have a Creature Shop in Queens, in New York, and we have the Creature Shop in Burbank out here.
Yeah, we got to go to that one, and that was a tremendous experience.
There's never been anything more intimidating, I think, in my life than walking into that place. Like, that was the most. And Mike and me went in there to chat with you about this project that we got to work on. And when we went in there, and basically we walk in, and Vince, your head of development, was like, okay, Mike, you can sit next to Oscar the Grouch. John, you can sit next to the Skeksis, and Steven, you can sit next to the baby from Dinosaurs. And we were like, oh, now tell us your creative ideas. We're like, oh, we're going to die. I'm going to kill myself.
Our thing is...
we have this idea for a robot.
I really felt like the Little Rascals putting on a show in their garage, like at the end of the day. Yeah, exactly. But when we went, I don't know if you recall this, but there was a moment you showed us. I don't remember the guy's name, but he has like his own dedicated lab.
Oh, John Criswell, head of mechanical, probably, right? In the back.
And it looks like a mad scientist laboratory all over the place. And one of the things that I noticed, because I'm such a huge comic book nerd, is that he had a full-on Iron Man helmet in there. And I was like, what's that? And you looked at it and you went, did we work on Iron Man? No, someone just made that for the heck of it. And I was like, oh my God, this would be the best place to work.
It was that place is phenomenal. Like just having seeing where the wild things are bodies up there, like the giant those giant costumes, and knowing that they were like legit like that process of work on or working with those guys. I mean, was it originally going to be puppets and then they flipped it, or did they do some in puppetry and some like some costume stuff?
Well, I think initially Spike had a really cool vision for it because they're these giant wild things, but he wanted them to like kind of move like toys, even though they're really big. So they kind of move like they're lightweight and they're kind of bouncy and stuff like that. And that was all part of his vision. Initially, he wanted them to fully perform like animatronically, but he was shooting where it was like 115 degrees. They're in the jungles and stuff like that, and it was just not practical. So where we ended up was he shot with the wild things were photographically perfect, but their faces didn't move. And that way they could be much lighter weight, and there could be more airflow around it. And then they did a very tricky technique in post where they then reanimated the faces using 3D animation, but they took the photographic image of the face and put it on the 3D animated face. So what you're seeing when you're watching the movie is you're seeing a real physical creature that wasn't moving when we shot it, and then they've applied the movement, which is pretty darn clever, which is why they look so real.
They look so real.
Like, well, or so fakey real. I mean, but they look like it's really happening. They don't look like 3D animation. And I think having the real creatures with their full size and all that around the kid was very important to Spike.
Absolutely.
Just what you said sparked an interesting memory from just about special effects in general, where it was one of the best responses I ever read to a critique of special effects, which was these two guys on the internet after the last Avengers. Someone writes, "The Hulk still looks fake," and someone below that writes, "The Hulk is fake." It was just like, you can't top that. That's perfect.
I really want to jump back to the beginning, if that's okay. Like,
what, the 2 steaks?
Yes, the 2 steaks.
The steak sword.
How many steaks? How many ounces is too many ounces? How many ounces is too many ounces? I don't know.
What's the most steak you've ever eaten?
Let's talk about it. No, you're. Did you start like? I know you have. Do you have brothers and sisters, or just sisters?
I grew up with 1 brother and 3 sisters, but my brother passed away a couple of years ago.
I'm so sorry about that.
So now I'm the last guy.
When you were a kid, was it kind of encouraged that, like, were you encouraged to be like part of the family business in a way, or were your other brothers and sisters, did they want to puppeteer as well? And
well, yeah, I mean, what happened was, I think my dad would have been thrilled with whatever we wanted to do. He was very empowering of, do whatever you want to do whatever you want to do. At the same time, he was a crazy workaholic, so he was working all the time. So our lives was like my father's work was like a hurricane that was blowing around us all the time. Like, to visit him often meant you're going on set to spend time with my dad. He didn't have time. He didn't spend much time at home. I mean, it was great when he was home, but he just worked. He was a proper workaholic, I think.
Yeah,
he was working all the time. So we were just in the middle of the work all the time. So that's what was sort of inspiring. And as kids, all of us would do something. You'd hang out in the workshop where they're making the puppets, next to like in the Muppet Show. So the Muppet Show was shot in London.
Right.
So we all spent a lot of time in London, but we had no friends or anything in London. So, we'd spend all this time in London and be like, well, what are you going to do? Can I just go to the studio every day with you, Dad?
So your best friend was Gonzo.
Kind of. So I would go to the studio all day long and just hang out and read books, but hang out in the workshop. And then the workshop people would be like, well, if you're going to be here, you want to make some talking watermelons? How about, can you make? So, and that was a lot of fun. So I was very young. I made the first Muppet Penguin, and
wow.
When I was like 14 or something like that. And Frank Oz picked, and it wasn't a great puppet, but I had done something that people hadn't done. I used latex, like 20 layers of latex paint to make the beaks. And Frank picked it up, and he was like, I like this. And he and Frank doesn't like anything, but he picked up the Penguin, and then they were doing Lullaby on Broadway was the musical number, but set in the Eskimos up in the snow and the ice. And Frank got a hold of this Penguin and was so funny with it, and then then they made lots and lots of penguins, and then. Wow. But I and I would work. I liked, as I got older, I liked working a lot with Foz Fazakis, who was head of the, I guess we called it, not really electronics, probably mechanical back then, but the radio-controlled puppets and all the stuff, the more tricky stuff, the marionette effects. So I would do the bicycle sequences in Great Muppet Caper.
Sure.
I worked on I did all of those. I was rigging and operating the marionettes to do the bicycle sequences.
The bicycles always impressed the hell out of me as a kid. I was like, because they're puppets, but that was one of those things where I was like, how did they do this?
Well, I think we didn't know that it was going to. It turns out, which makes sense when you think about it, you don't hold the bicycle up with the strings. What you're doing is riding the bicycle with the strings. And once you know that, it makes total sense. So I was in a crane, and the crane was moving down the street. But the bicycle was riding itself. I was just steering it with the strings, and you get real good at it so that you can sort of steer it around things and stuff like that. Wow. So, but the bicycle is balancing itself, which is why it looks so right on camera, because it is balancing itself.
That's amazing.
Just amazing.
Yeah, no, that's really phenomenal. Where would your other brothers and sisters, would they hang out on set with you while this was happening?
Yeah, I think everybody spent a lot of time on set.
Would your mom be there too, or
not so much? She was raising 5 of us, so not so much. My mom was generally at home, and then kids were generally spread. And it wasn't often 5 of us at the studio.
Sure.
So. We all spent time. My brother John did a lot of puppeteering. He liked getting inside suits. He liked doing really physical stuff. He took over Sweetums. all those Coca-Cola bears my brother John would do. And with the Coca-Cola bears, he did crazy stuff. Like he went to the Japanese Winter Olympics and was skiing. He was skiing the race courses in a polar bear suit that he was blind. He couldn't see out of it. It had a tiny little camera in the nose, so he could point the head with his hand, and he was
Wow.
skiing.
Oh my God!
I know, he was
That's crazy.
He was a very good skier, so he could pull it off. But
You've led a heck of a life if you were able to ski in a polar bear suit in the Olympics. No one else gets to say that.
Yeah, nobody else is doing that. Absolutely.
No, and then Cheryl did a lot of puppet building and some performing.
Do you remember your first like act, like, because I know you acted a lot too on these, or you'd kind of would jump in and do, you're not act, but you would do like voices, or you'd come in and you'd
well,
puppeteer
not so much.
and stuff.
I mean, originally I used to laugh at when people would say I was performing. I was like, you know what, I don't really like performing. I'm really more of a special effects guy.
Right.
So I was really much more of, give me something really complicated to figure out, like the rats cooking in Muppets Take Manhattan.
Yeah,
I worked on that sequence for weeks, months, to figure out how all the rats would do all the cooking and stuff like that. And that was really the kind of thing that I like to do. On Sesame Street, I did some of the counting films when I was like 5 years old, but that's hardly acting.
Right, sure.
That's just say these words.
Do you remember
the
first time that you puppeted on camera?
That I voiced.
Were you voiced or you puppeted?
You mean where I would puppeteer all the time?
Yeah.
But generally, it was to do some weird, tricky thing with the puppets. As soon as the puppet was just speaking and doing a scene, that was not what I did. Yeah. I would be too nervous about it and all of that. It just wasn't. It wasn't. I was more of a gadgety kind of guy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I liked marionettes. I liked radio controlled. I liked cable controlled things. I liked figuring out how to do things more than performing.
Sure.
But then I guess I did Return to Oz was really the first time I was performing. And that was not for my dad. That was for Walter Murch was directing.
Yeah, that was a complicated movie.
Yeah.
That's a...
it's a really cool... That was my... first movie that I did the whole movie, where I wasn't in school, and that was the first time.
How old were you when that happened?
I think I was 20.
Yeah,
I dropped out of college.
You were 20 years old doing
when
that?
I did Return to Oz.
Oh my God!
What were your responsibilities on that movie? Because I know you played Jack the Pumpkinhead,
and that was really my responsibility. I mean, I was a young kid, and Lyle Conway was the head of the shop, building all of the creatures, and Lyle was looking for technical puppeteers that had a good technical ability to breathe life into creatures that are kind of pretty technically difficult to operate. Wow. And so he asked me to audition, and then I went over to audition, absolutely sure I wasn't going to get the movie, but there was a girl in England. And I was like I'm going to get a ticket to England, and there's this girl that I met in Paris the previous year.
Yeah.
And I was looking for an excuse to... Anyway, I ended up marrying the girl. She was my first wife, and then we were very happy for a while. But anyway, I actually got the girl and the movie, which was surprising.
Yeah.
But my responsibilities was just Jack Pumpkinhead. I guess I helped. We all helped each other with the other characters, but we were basically in little groupings, and I was the Jack Pumpkinhead group, and there was 4 of us that worked Jack Pumpkinhead.
What was that? That movie has the story behind making Return to Oz is kind of an intense story, because I know that they went out there, they started working on it, and then Disney was producing it, and Disney kind of stopped at some point, or
I don't. I
it
never
got kind of weird. Yeah.
It did get weird. Walter is a genius.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
And he had done all the sound design and sound editing for Star Wars.
Right.
Which was changed the industry.
Yeah.
The Star Wars soundtrack, everybody talks about, well, what is the strength of Star Wars? Well, there was an awful lot of elements, but almost the most amazing part is the sound. The sound of the gunshots and the cannons.
Vader breathing, the lightsabers.
Yeah.
And
he designed all of those sound effects, and he was also an editor, and a really, really excellent editor. But this was, something he wanted to direct, and he'd been working on it for a long time. And he was a huge fan of the L. Frank Baum books.
Right.
Yeah.
And he had grown up on the Oz books, and oddly, so did I. They were one of my father had Bomba the Jungle Boy books and Return to Oz, the Frank Baum Oz books.
Sure.
And I had been a huge fan. I had read them all as a kid too.
TikTok and
even though it was a full generation later, so I knew all the books too. And Walter was trying to do something that was tonally L. Frank Baum, that wasn't tonally the huge Wizard of Oz movie that everybody knew so well. He wanted to do something that was darker and sparser and do it like Frank Baum.
The creatures all looked like the illustrations.
Yeah.
It was really impressive how they did that.
And then I think what happened was we were just getting started with shooting, and Disney was going through a big transition. That was when Michael Eisner was taking over, and you don't ever. Unfortunately, there's so many transitions in all of the studios and stuff, and you always want to say you don't want to be in pre-production during a transition because that's you're always in the most vulnerable spot, and yet it'll happen 1 out of 4 times because there's so many transitions. Yeah. But and I think he just sort of got caught up in that where, here was the new group. They didn't know what this Return to Oz thing was. They didn't really get it, and they were going to replace Walter. And Walter had been working for years. The only reason why the movie was being made and faithful to L. Frank Baum was Walter. It was Walter who had been selling it and working on it for years and years and years. So the idea that somebody else would direct it, that was kind of really a weird idea, because then it's like, well, now why would you make it? You either make it with Walter because he's the one with the vision, or don't make it. So there was this brief period where they were saying maybe Walter should be replaced, and it was nonsense. And Francis Coppola, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg showed up the next day and sat on set and basically dared the production to fire Walter. And they just sat there, and to help and support Walter. Anyway, and in the end, they all came around and went, okay, yeah, absolutely. Of course, Walter has to make it. It's ridiculous, But I think they were nervous. It was his first movie directing and all that, and it was, all that stuff.
To have that kind of support, from those people, that's amazing.
It was terrific.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's very cool.
That's amazing.
Now, as a fan of all the puppeteering and stuff like that, it's one thing to see Kermit, when I've seen Kermit, you don't just see Kermit running around and doing whatever he does. But I was watching an old episode of The Tonight Show the other day, and your father was on with Kermit on his hand, sitting there talking to Johnny Carson on the couch in a little chair. It's a much different thing to see somebody actually doing it while you see the puppet going. Have you ever found that knowing how all this stuff works, I guess you grew up, not like me, I didn't grow up seeing how this stuff works, but you grew up seeing how it all worked. Do you find there's a difference between knowing how something works, and do you lose a little bit of appreciation for what goes on because of that, or do you find that you appreciate it even more?
I don't think so. Although it was like when you said it was Gonzo your best friend growing up. That's where I'm crossing over into a reality that I can't. Really, I can't go to the place of I really thought they were alive.
Right. Well,
because I was always watching it going on. There was no point where I was young enough or naive enough that I kind of really bought into the illusion. But my dad would always show off how we did it, and he always enjoyed people coming to visit and seeing how we do it. And his feeling was it's such an entertaining art form and an illusion that you don't even really need to hide it all.
That was the amazing thing.
That was his whole thing, and I think he even said it to Johnny Carson or Arsenio Hall. He said, I don't mind at all sitting here and talking with Kermit, and my mouth moves. I'm not a ventriloquist. I don't know anything like that, but it doesn't matter. The audience is looking at the frog. Just take a look at it.
Yeah, that was the amazing thing. I was like, this is still great, even watching the guy do it. It's like the Penn and Teller type thing where you see them do the magic and they show exactly how it works, and you're still like, well, that's still amazing.
Yeah, it's still amazing.
Yeah.
Real quick, I just gotta throw this at you because Matt's like a big Star Trek nerd, and he knows everything about Star Trek. Beverly Crusher, who played Beverly Crusher on Star Trek?
Gates McFadden.
Gates McFadden. I ran into Gates McFadden a few months ago, and she said that she worked with you
on Labyrinth.
On Labyrinth.
Yeah.
So was she what did she do? Was she the dance? No,
we had this weird thing where she and I shared a very similar role, but she was the more dramaturge, acting side, and I was the more logistical, mechanical, technical side. So I can't remember what the credit was, like chief puppeteer on Labyrinth or something like that, or puppeteer captain. We always had different names for it. But basically what I would do,
you finally achieved
Labyrinth,
the rank of puppeteer captain.
And we kept changing it. It was like every movie we don't like that name anymore. But basically there would be one head performer who was more managerial and more technical than the other, who then would effectively, I'd look at the storyboards and talk to the directors and figure out what the creatures needed to achieve on camera. So what would happen is the creature shop would be working from the design forward, creating a character, and I would work from what they need to do on camera backwards, and then the creature shop and I would work hand in hand as the character gets realized to look like the design and deliver on the design, but also will be realized in such a way that it can achieve in front of the camera what it needs to do performance-wise. So I was the head performer in that capacity, and I would train the puppeteers and locate them. But then Cheryl was. You said Gates. Her name was Cheryl back then.
Sure, yeah.
It was Cheryl McFadden. But and so what Cheryl was she was sort of responsible more for the performance, the acting of the characters, to help that aspect. Yeah. So I would bring it all together in these teams of performers, and then she'd help nuance the characters and the personalities. And mostly she was doing a lot of work with Hoggle, with my character. And Hoggle and Ludo and Didymus. I mean, the more important personalities in the movie was where she spent a lot of her time.
So when you say, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, well, I just think since we're on this subject and since he passed recently, do you have any interesting memories of David Bowie that you could share from that time?
Oh, well, lots. He was great to work with.
Oh,
He was.
cool.
He was. It was interesting. He was a crazy workaholic, just like my dad. So it was interesting watching them work together. They had great respect for each other. When David first came in with the demo tracks, normally demo tracks for a movie is a vocal and plunking away on a piano. you know,
Sure, yeah.
That's normally what. And he came in with fully mixed and studio produced tracks with the Harlem Choir singing backup. And it was,
Whoa!
And he did it in such a short amount of time. It was like my dad was impressed, that he was coming in with all the tracks demoed, but that he had finished them that fast. He thought it was fast, even if it was just a vocal track and piano. And instead, they were these fully produced tracks. And so David was a very impressive guy. My dad was very impressed by him. But then both of them kind of have this very sort of naughty sense of humor. And they both really just like to laugh and tell stories. And so they got along like a house on fire from very different worlds. I mean, there was David, who was the king of the glamour celebrity world. And there was my dad, who was, the artsy-fartsy puppet and creature guy. But they worked extremely well together. David was very patient. Like, he had Michael Motion was a juggler who had to reach up through David's costume. So every time David has the crystal balls, and they're rolling on his hand, that wasn't David doing that. And in those days, there were no optical effects. There was no 3D digital animation that could do that. So it was really happening. And there was a master juggler, Michael Motion, who was hiding behind David and reaching up through David's costume.
Oh yeah, and watching on a monitor.
Yeah, it was unbelievably
phenomenal.
Impossible. It's like
while he's delivering this whole monologue and moving around and stuff.
It was unbelievable. But it took many, many, many takes because Michael would accidentally drop the ball because he can't see it. He's used
literally
to his act is doing. Michael's act is he does that right in front of his own face. He doesn't do it reaching, hiding on the ground and reaching up through somebody's costume. So, but David was always very, very patient and got a kick out of it, and he didn't mind if it took 30 takes. It was fine. He was lovely to work with all of his, very, very patient. And actually, for him, I think for David it was almost like a break. Actually, doing the movie for him, because he's so driven and works so much that he kind of, for him, most people would say
It's like an oasis.
for
sort
him
of.
it was like it's almost holiday, you know. But he was so professional. He was always there. He loved going for a drink like pretty much every day. not drinking a lot, just having a pint of beer, but with all of the crews. And and it was
cool.
very much like they were his people, you know. When David just relaxes and talks and is just himself, his background and his part of London and all that. They're all the people that are in the film industry. So it was a very sort of homey and relaxing environment for him.
Yeah, I was just at a little family thing from Mother's Day, and I saw my cousin, and my cousin, you know, he's got 3 little girls, and I was wearing a Labyrinth T-shirt with David Bowie on it, and it's the poster. I got it from Loot Crate. It was a very cool Loot Crate shirt, and I'm wearing it, and my cousin's kid, who's 7 years old, points at my shirt, and she goes, "I know who that is." And I go, "Who?" And she goes, "The Goblin King." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Daddy showed us. We had a samba party. We saw the Goblin King. Daddy, Goblin King." And like the other kid comes over who's like 6, and she was like, "They go into Woogo. And I was like, I immediately was like, my cousin's doing a great job. Like, I was like, everything else I've heard, everything else I know about my cousin, I couldn't give 2 shits. But like the fact that he's like, raising his kids, making them watch Labyrinth, I was like, that we're good. We're
if
solid.
those are accurate impressions, he should get them in speech therapy.
You know, my favorite part about I don't know, it's not my favorite part, but it's definitely one of my favorite parts about Labyrinth was that there were tiny little puppets, there were tiny little creatures, and there were enormous, like giant, like 2-story creatures. And I watched like a making of documentary, and I was blown away by how they did it and how they were like, you know, that was, I just thought the range of creatures in that movie were outrageous. But especially getting to watch you know, watching you in this documentary from, you know, watching you, you know, do Hoggle and seeing how you're working on this. Can you explain a little bit of how that process was of working of making that character, of doing that character? Because that's like it was a short little guy, and you're doing all the puppeteering on it and all
it was before we were using computers between the performer and the motors in the character. So Hoggle was the first time we ever made a wireless character. So that was new for us, where the motors were in the head and the batteries were being carried on the belt, and we were transmitting the motor signals to, I mean, I say first time, no. Like Emmett Otter, you would have very simple animatronic Muppets, but they were very simple in what they could do. So this was a really sophisticated character. I think there was 30 motors, or maybe not 30. I can't remember exactly how many in the head. So it took 4 puppeteers then to work that many motors. Today we would do it with 1 puppeteer and use a computer to mix all of these. So today we would perform expressions. Then you could only perform individual motors. So there were 4 of us puppeteers, each using both hands to control specific motors, like a radio control airplane, I guess. But they were the interface that we were using were all a little bit different. But 1 puppeteer basically did the eyes, eyeballs, eyelids. 1 puppeteer did the eyebrows and cheeks, and then 1 puppeteer, me and another puppeteer, basically did the mouth. One puppeteer, Rob, did some lip shapes, and I did the jaw and some lip shapes, and then I would voice the character because I was working the jaw. So I was basically like the lead on the face, and then Sherry Weiser, who is very little, 3'2", maybe a little taller, was inside of Hoggle, and initially we put a camera in Hoggle's stomach, and then inside the head, Sherry could see out of the camera basically through video camera eyepiece, you know.
Yeah.
And it didn't work, and it very quickly. First day of shooting, it was clear that this wasn't going to work because But the reason why we did it was so that when he opened his mouth, you would see the inside of Hoggle's mouth. But it wasn't working for Sherry because she would turn her head and the image wouldn't change, but she'd turn her body and the image would, and it just wasn't working. So we had to quickly undo that. So then she wore blackface, and she was just looking right out the mouth. And people would say, how did you develop that character? I mean, the weird sounds that he makes all the time is like, well, no. It was by necessity. I had to keep finding reasons to open the mouth so that Sherry wouldn't run into a tree or walk off a step. So that's why Hoggle, all the time he's walking, is going, shit. He's always grumbling to himself. None of that was scripted. It was like, if I don't do that, then Sherry's going to walk into the tree. So
wow.
Yeah.
So you did the voice as well as you did both. Oh my God, that's amazing.
I'm sure a lot of people ask you who your favorite character to do was, but I'm curious, who's your least favorite character that you ever had to do?
Oh, that's not a fair question. And actually, I don't even have a good answer. I don't
Love them all.
I don't have a good answer because actually, probably the one that I disliked the most, I also loved the most.
Sure.
So
it was like probably the most trouble for you, I'm gonna guess.
Dr. Phil Van Neuter.
Okay.
From Muppets Tonight, and then he was in Muppets from Space. He's the brain surgeon, mad scientist guy who's gonna take Gonzo's brain. That voice, I'm not even sure I can do it. But what would happen is if I shot in that voice for more than 6 hours, I couldn't speak for 3 days.
Oh, okay.
And he talks something like this all the time.
Yeah.
It was so, and I can't even really do it because it hurts.
But it would hurt.
But it would hurt my hand. Like it required so much energy because he was like this wired guy. And it hurt my hand, and it hurt my voice. And at the same time, there's a level of insanity to that character that I also found. Muppets Tonight was in a very busy time for our company, so it was like
I loved that show. I thought it was a great show.
But I had my office on that side of the lot, which was my CEO office of the corporation, and then I had my producer's office on the other side of the lot, and then I had my performing gig on Muppets Tonight, and I think that I developed such an insane personality for Dr. Phil Van Neuter because it was like I needed to. I needed to because being the CEO and all the business stuff while trying to produce the TV show was like so crazy that I needed an outlet. So I would do Phil Van. It was completely cathartic. Thank you. That was the word I was searching for. It was completely cathartic. So I would do Phil Van Neuter, and at the end of the night, I'd be like, I'm relaxed for the first time in weeks. I can't talk, and my hand is killing me, but I'm actually relaxed.
I'm glad we didn't hire Gilbert Gottfried to do this. It's
well, we saw you. Me and Mike saw you do
Puppet Up.
And oh my God, when you came out, the audience first of all went like ape shit when you walked on stage. They were so excited to see you. But then you did the crab.
That was great.
Oh, I did one piece. Yeah.
If anybody's listening, if you're listening to this and you get the chance to see Puppet Up, I don't know when you guys do the show again.
Well, we've kind of been sleeping it because we're going to open at the Venetian in Vegas from July 21st on. Yeah. So
my God.
It'll be in Vegas.
If you can get tickets to the Vegas show, do it. It is so worthwhile.
It's the most incredible thing.
Such a fun show.
It's like improv sketch all with puppets, and it's just absolutely genius. It's like what Avenue Q wants to be, like, basically. Like, God bless, but still, I mean, like, literally, it's a little dirty. It's like, right? It's kind of
it's inappropriate.
It's
Puppet Up uncensored. It's inappropriate for audiences under 16.
I am serious. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm telling you, if you're in Vegas, talk to the pit boss, whoever you have to talk to get tickets, beg, borrow, steal, scalp, whatever it takes.
You do whatever.
Go see this show. It is worth seeing. Yeah.
I gotta jump back. There's one thing that we
back to the steak.
Yes,
sword.
Back to the steak. How many ounces is too many ounces? How many ounces? This is one that was a big part of my childhood as far as like a show that I watched that I couldn't figure out how it was happening because I'd never seen anything like this, and no one had ever seen anything like this. And I know that you were a big part of it. Dinosaurs. Can we talk a little bit about the how that came together and what you did and
how did
that happened?
How did it go from suing Disney to doing a show with them?
Well,
very
first of
quickly
all,
afterwards?
we all had to get along,
Yeah.
and we knew it. Michael Eisner knew it, and I knew it. There was all these beautiful attractions in the theme park.
Yeah.
They had to stay open. We all had to get nice,
Yeah.
and we knew it. And Dinosaurs, we were developing that and getting that ready while we were still merging the companies. And then when we decided not to merge it, at that point, ABC were really excited about it. So we kept going, and we produced it with Disney. And in the end, we all got along fine. It was business. It was, but Dinosaurs is an interesting one. I remember my dad. I was in London until when my dad died. I was working really the London end of the company. I would go over to Canada and do a little shoot, or I'd come to America to do a shoot. But I lived and was based in London and worked with the London Creature Shop. And then, so when my dad died, and I had to start living half the time here in L.A. and then even more. I sort of brought a lot of the sensibility of the UK Creature Shop with me. So, but I remember my dad in London sort of pitching to me, or discussing with me. He said, I got two ideas for a primetime comedy. And one is a guy who's a ventriloquist, but the ventriloquist dummy is really alive. And it's kind of like The Odd Couple, but the dummy has to pretend he's a dummy, so that when they do the show and they perform every night, but actually the dummy's alive and they're trying to live together. And that was one idea. And then his other idea, which was like a callback all the way back to LaChoy Dragon, which was early commercials that my dad did, where he got in a dragon costume. And that breathed fire, and he would just come barreling through grocery stores, knocking everything down, screaming at the patrons that they need to buy LaChoy Dragons, chow mein noodles, or whatever it was.
So great.
But so then he had this idea. He said, so I got this idea that it's dinosaurs, and he said this was his idea, and then I guess I changed it. But his idea was they're really crappy costumes. Like, maybe you even can see the zippers. And it's just these clumsy dinosaur, stupid costumes. And they're living so irresponsibly. They're like us, but they're so irresponsible that they're going to go extinct. And that was sort of his idea, was that you had these incredibly irresponsible. And he said it would kind of have the tone of like Honeymooners.
Yeah. Sure.
So that was kind of where that's kind of where he was, which ultimately it really is what the show is, other than the cheap suits with zippers.
Yeah,
because of course, then I got in and I was like, I don't know, let's do something that's actually groundbreaking. Let's do really sophisticated animatronic creatures. But it was a little overambitious. Like, we had to shoot one a week because it's a half-hour sitcom. You have to deliver them once a week.
Yeah.
The 1 hour shows, you're allowed to have hiatuses. The 1 hour shows, it's like, all right, we understand. It takes more than a week to make a 1 hour show. So television was fine with lots of preemptions on the 1 hour series, but not on the half-hour series. You're meant to keep up. So, but for us, we were shooting, like, on a Monday morning, we'd have 7 a.m. call, but then we'd always go more than 12 hours, and then there's a SAG 12-hour turnaround.
Yeah.
So, or even with the waivers, we were down to 11 maybe, but so Tuesday we would start at 9, Wednesday we'd start at noon, Thursday we'd start at 2 in the afternoon, Friday we'd start at like 4 p.m., and we'd wrap every Saturday at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And then come next Monday, you'd start at 7 a.m. It was kind of crazy.
God.
But so then Michael Jacobs came on with Bob Young. They're the writers. They wrote these, and they're great scripts. And we had all the writers that came through that Dinosaurs.
Who came up
writing
with
them.
Not the Mama?
That
One of my
was
all-time
in
favorite
Michael.
lines. I've watched on
That was-
video. There's clips where they just take the baby, hitting the dad with a frying pan, saying "Not the mama" over and over again for like 10 minutes, and I've watched that for 10 minutes just straight. It cracks me up every single time.
Well, that was Michael Jacobs' idea, and he is a very devoted father, and that was what he latched in on, was the baby just only loves mommy, and the baby is just an evil
It's
demon.
the star of the show to me. The
So
baby's the star of the
funny.
show to me. Like, I can't get enough of that baby.
Absolutely. Which Seth MacFarlane really took a
Yeah,
hint from with
Stewie's sort
Family
of
Guy.
a
Completely.
knockoff on that. Yeah.
Yeah. What type of work were you doing on that show?
Well, I was executive producing with Michael, and then Michael was overseeing the script, and definitely writers were on set with all the character work. But then I was the one figuring out how to do it. So had to build all the creatures, and we built them initially in London, and then we brought them over here. And then once we started shooting, it was so complicated and so much work needed to be done to the creatures overnight before the next shoot that we kind of had a 24-hour shop going to support it. And then we decided, once we were done with dinosaurs, we decided to just keep that shot, and that's why we have an LA creature shop now. That's in Burbank now. That all was created because of dinosaurs. But that's what I did. I figured out how to work everything, and I directed some episodes in later third and fourth season once the show was running, and then I could direct as well. And I did.
Were there a lot of times when you came in and you saw the script, you're like, "How the hell am I going to do this?" Like, did that happen a lot on that show?
Oh, sure. And then we would change it if we needed to, if it was just too impossible. Largely, we'd say to the writers, "Look, write what you want." But then there's a lot of things that puppets and animatronic creatures don't do very well. But it's sometimes it's surprising. Something you think is going to be really hard actually isn't so hard. So. We would kind of shoot for the moon for what they were doing, but all the time we were trying to create, we were trying to make it look almost effortless, so that it did really feel like these dinosaurs that just live in this house.
It looked amazing.
Was this the first project for you to work on after your father passed, or was this had you worked on other stuff in between the?
No, this was probably the first.
That's a.
I mean, when my father died, I was halfway through a TV series in London, so.
What show was that?
That was called Mother Goose Stories.
Oh,
it's a preschool series, really nice. Won lots of awards and stuff. It was Charlie Long. No. That's her. She did She did a Mother Goose series.
Oh, okay.
Which is different, where she was telling stories. No, I did. It was all with puppets. We shot in. It was so much fun. It was just a bunch of us. We were real young, and Ron Muick was building all the puppets and designing them, and they were gorgeous. And there was a book called from L. Frank Baum, again, called Mother Goose Stories, that Frank Baum did with Maxfield Parrish.
Oh, okay.
So there's this fantastic book out there called Mother Goose in Prose, I think.
Yeah.
And Maxfield Parrish's illustrations run all the way through it, and it's some of his most famous paintings. And so we tried to make the series feel like L. Frank Baum telling the stories, and we tried to make all the puppets and the environments look like Maxfield Parrish paintings.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Wow.
So, anyway, sorry. How did I get on that?
No.
Oh, I guess I finished that series after my father passed. Then Frank took over the finishing of the Muppet Vision 3D movie, so that also hadn't been completed. And then I guess the first production that we started from scratch was probably Dinosaurs.
Wow. All right, I want to throw. Let me ask one thing. Do we have time? Are we okay? Or how we do? We have to wrap things up.
Nobody remembered to time us.
I know. We're having too good at time. I have to mention Farscape just because I'm such a huge fan. What a groundbreaking, completely badass show, especially to throw your hat into that ring, into the sci-fi ring. Like, that type of sci-fi is just incredible, and you guys did it in such a badass way. I loved it.
Well, thank you. I probably am most proud of Farscape in terms of my body of work, because it is very unique, and I'm really proud of it. It was a mad scramble. We were spending probably half of what Star Trek was at the time.
Sure.
So, and we were shooting in Australia, and it was just wild. Shooting it was wild. But we had this idea early on that it was gonna be kind of a little bit more primitive than Star Trek. The idea being, Star Trek, and all of the spin-offs had sort of established themselves. The idea that in the future, people are much better at controlling their emotions.
Yeah.
They're operating at a slightly higher.
They don't fight anymore.
Right.
And they don't, yeah.
Right. Sure.
And their emotions, they're much more in control.
Yeah.
And so we knew we needed to stand out. We also knew we were going to go a little bit more out there with the characters, and we were going to use puppets, and we were going to do some wild stuff. And so we had this vision that ultimately, as you go into the future, the technology starts to take care of itself. so the cultures can start becoming more and more primitive again. Because you know, they don't. Rigel doesn't know how to take apart Moya and fix Moya. Moya fixes Moya. You know, because you've gone far enough into the future, so we actually had this idea that it was going to be kind of primitive, that the cultures and the alien cultures would be more primitive, and that the emotions actually would be dialed up, that all of the characters would be more emotional and less in control of their emotions, and that just created, and that combined with, we were making it in Australia, where people just have a wilder, they have a brighter fire burning in them.
They really do. That's one way of saying it.
You know,
for sure.
And it just, it just all came together and created. We really sort of broke the mold on science fiction and the tone of science fiction, which has then been followed up.
And it's so credible now because the way we respond to technology is very primitive now, where it's like, I remember Louis C.K. talking about getting mad at your cell phone because it won't contact outer space fast enough for your liking. And it's like, we really do. Just like, I don't know how it works, but I want it to work right now.
Why isn't it fixing itself?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. We can always cut this out if you don't want to talk about it. But Anthony. No, Anthony Simcoe.
I'm sorry. Anthony Minghella wrote Storyteller. Wow, I was on something completely different. Anthony Simcoe.
And his makeup and his
Dargo.
Is that a story that we can tell, or is it?
Why not?
You told us when we were at the creature shop. You told us the story about him and his makeup and having issues.
No, I don't really want to talk about issues, but it was a very difficult makeup, and Anthony is one of my best friends. And to get in that makeup is extraordinarily time-consuming and difficult.
It's really intense.
It's hours. He'd be in the seat for hours. But actually, so was Chiana and Zahn, actually doing a very careful face painting and body painting like Zahn and Chiana had. It's just as time-consuming.
Yeah.
But Anthony's was definitely the most rubber. I mean, he was in a lot of makeup. And, it's hard. Year after year, that gets hard. But the funniest thing was you'd walk on the set, and the way that Anthony could deal with shooting long days is he just had to take all his clothes off. And then he was okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So we would be rehearsing. And if you walked into Farscape rehearsing, Dargo is just this 6'4" white guy who's got boxer shorts on and his Dargo face.
Right.
Because his costume was a big, heavy costume and the gloves and everything, and you put it all together. But in rehearsal, he won't, that would all go on right before we would shoot. And the rest of the time he would be, he'd have his Dargo face and he'd be telling silly jokes and prancing about in his boxer shorts.
Oh my God. I love it. Well, if you haven't seen Farscape, you got to go and I believe a lot of it, some of it's on Netflix right now, which is super cool to check out. But I love it. It's a great show. We got to wrap this up. Brian, tell us what's coming up. Anything that we can. Where can people?
Go see Puppet Up in
In
Vegas.
Vegas?
That one is one that's sort of I'm putting a lot of effort into right now. And then there's other stuff. There's lots of cool kids television coming out of the company, but and that's mostly my sister Lisa and Hallie Sanford do that mostly. And then I've got a lot of other projects. One with you guys that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. Well, we're big fans of you. It's seriously such an enormous honor to be able to come and hang out with you. Anytime we've been able to hang out with you, it's a huge honor. But getting to just sit around and talk for an hour is a huge deal. And it's like just feeds the inner child, man. It feeds the whole dreamscape of being able to want to do something like this for so long, and we get to hang out and get to make cool stuff and work together, and it's awesome. Mike, any closing thoughts, my friend?
I was just thinking while you were saying that, I was like, if you have the ambition, move to Hollywood and start trying to do stuff like this because you have days like this.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Try it, get out there.
Guys. It's been
Better believe it. For sure. Thanks for being here. Matt, where can they
I was going to say,
find
if
you?
you have the ambition, move to Hollywood, but please carpool. We have enough cars on the freeway. Stop screwing up my traffic. Check me out at funnymat.com, and thank you.
You bet. Mike, where can they find you on the things?
At Mike Black Attack on all social media.
What's the website for Jim Henson Company? Is it if they want to check out Puppet Up? Is it Jim Henson? Henson.com?
Or JimHenson.com. You'll get to it.
I love
any
it.
way that you
use the
want.
Googles.
Use the Googles. This is Stephen Glickman. At Stephen Glickman is STEPHEN Glickman on all social media, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks again. Don't forget to subscribe to the Nighttime Show podcast and leave comments and reviews. And we love you. Thanks so much, Brian, for having us. You're the freaking coolest.
Oh, well, hey, it's my pleasure. It's been great fun.
All right. Talk to you soon. Love you guys. Peace.